here looking at the book of Jonah in the Old Testament. We're looking at this. And to give us a little background, a little cultural background, I'm going to read the first verse, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. Verse 1, Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. All right, so Jonah is in the land of Israel, and basically Jonah's name means dove, and his father's name, Amittai, means loyal or faithful. And so most commentators have said that what we should know about Jonah is he comes from a believing family. He comes from a faithful group of people. So he is in Israel during this time of the divided kingdoms. And Nineveh was not in Israel. Nineveh was a part of the Assyrian Empire. To give you the quick version, this is what my Old Testament prophet did to explain it all to us, and I still find it pretty useful today. So we have the nation of Israel. It always kind of looks like a rectangle there. And then you have the ocean, right? And then you have the divided kingdoms. You have the north and the south. And then from over here, this is sort of where Babylon is. And you have the Babylonian Empire come in, and you have the Assyrian Empire come in, and the Seleucids, and every single time it's called something different, the basic geography is more or less the same. It's always the bad guys come in, they come into this area, they take over, they do those sorts of things. We remember in the Old Testament before, we had the Philistines who had their 5 cities around here, and they would sail on the seas. The Israelites didn't do that. So the Israelites are this scared little country here, and they're always getting attacked by these big bullying tribes and these big invaders from across the sea and from up north. And so they're always fearful of those invaders. And there was a nation, the Assyrian nation, that was a violent oppressor of God's people. They were the ones who conquered. We remember the Babylonian captivity, where they went and they took the Jews away from the land of Judah and took them away to Babylon. While the Assyrians just went in and tried to assimilate and slaughter God's people. So if you can imagine, Jonah is a faithful man living in a faithful country, and where is God calling him to preach? In the enemy territory, right? This is the analogy I like to use, is this is getting the call to Tehran, to being a pastor there, right? This is the call to go to your enemy's location, right? In Canadian terms, it might be going to Toronto from anywhere that's not Toronto. People's attitudes towards Toronto is not overly positive all across Canada. Apologies if you love Toronto. Or probably the other way around, right? Going from Toronto to, I don't know, Milford, Saskatchewan or something like that would be quite a... But even more than that, more than just the isolation, more than the barriers that would be there as a different people, it's an enemy nation, right? So maybe a better analogy would be if you're in Ukraine and you get called to preach in Moscow, right? Or vice versa. You're in a place where you probably know people who have been killed by the enemy. You probably know people who have been brutalized by these Assyrians. And what is God calling Jonah to do? Go preach, go talk to them, right? Now, there's an interesting thing that happens. Throughout history, there have been some amongst God's people that have been persecuted, that have been hated by their enemies, and their response, instead of turning like Christ and loving their enemies, their response has been good. Let them burn. Vengeance will come on them. They have no idea the pains that are going to be awaiting them. And some people are gleeful about it. There have been theologians throughout the history of the church who have said that what they were looking forward to in heaven was watching people burn in hell. That's what they were going to celebrate. Which is a whole lot of problems wrapped into one. But I think the reason I mention it is I think Jonah might have been one of those people. He's one of those people who does not want the Assyrians to be converted. He does not want them to be saved. He is faithful and loyal, and he's getting called and sent to a place that, we don't know all of Jonah's backstory. He might have had friends. He might have had a fiance. He might have had someone close to him killed or taken or victimized by the Assyrians. So he's called to go there, go to the enemy people, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me. This is an interesting thing in the Old Testament. I mention it just because sometimes people will mention to me nowadays, they'll say, like, Pastor, I'm watching the news, and it's so terrible out there. This is not the type of terrible that I grew up with. This is, confusion and chaos and awful beyond anything that I've ever lived through. And why isn't God doing something about it? And I think the reason they often ask that is because throughout the Bible, we get this accounting of evil, where God kind of looks out and he sees that the earth is always evil continually. We read that in Genesis chapter 6. But then there are moments where their evil arises to heaven. There are moments in the Old Testament where something is so bad that God has to step in and dramatically act. And we do see that in history as well. And so here, Assyria's sins have become so great that they've actually rose up to God. And he's in a way that he is not going to leave it. He's not going to allow for them to keep going this way. And so he's sending a prophet. Now it's interesting. It tells us something about the mercy and grace of God. If you were God and there was a group of people that you really hated because they were doing really awful stuff, what would your godlike impulse be? Destroy them, right? I mean, that's probably the first. I mean, I was once a little boy melting ants with a magnifying glass, right? I mean, it's tempting as humans to always see power as the chance to destroy our enemies. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that God does not instinctively and reflexively go to destroy his enemies. He goes to convert and to save them. All right. Let's keep reading on, all right? Verse 3, but Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went on board to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Ooh, I get to quiz the kids who are in confirmation. Do you remember the big word we learned on Sunday that says that God is everywhere present? He's omnipresent. Yeah, God is omnipresent. He's present in all places. So what mistake does Jonah make then? Can he escape from the presence of God? Nope. Good answer.
They said Tarshish so many times because it's just fun to say.
That's a great question.
It is not a great question.
Is Tarshish a fun... Well, it's a great question because it lets me talk more about my Hebrew nerdiness.
I'm sorry, everyone.
If you look up Tarshish on a map, you will probably have a helpful little Bible map somewhere, and it will tell you that somewhere in Spain is Tarshish. And that's a nice idea, but actually when you look it up, Tarshish is a word that is sometimes used in Hebrew just to mean to the seas, that way. So if you're looking at the map of... If you're looking at the map, Israel is here. This is the ocean that they don't like to go in. This is why last week in Bible study we said there will be no seas in heaven because they were scared of the ocean. Where does Jonah, what does he do? He gets on a boat and he says, send me that way. Send me in that direction. Send me to the seas. Send me to the farthest scariest place. And there may have been a city in Spain called Tarshish. I'm not certain of it, but I think what's so fascinating about the story is this is like one of those old movies where someone jumps into a cab and says, go that way, or follow that car, or, just head in that direction. So Jonah doesn't care. He basically gets on the first boat and says, take me as far away from this place as possible. And we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the book of Ruth. God's people had a calling to Israel. It wasn't just that they lived there by accident. It was that they were called to dwell in that land, which tells you why there is right now so much bloodshed and terror going on, because they still feel that they are called to that land, to live in that spot. So when Jonah is doing this, he is abandoning the direct call of God, and he is abandoning the revealed call of God to live in this land, to be an Israelite. So this is more than just disobedience. This is like burning your baptismal certificate. This is like saying, I'm not a part of the people of Israel anymore. I'm done with this project of God's people. So this rebellion is a high-handed rebellion, right? Ooh, another good word we're going to get to soon. All right, so he even pays to do it, right? So he goes down to Joppa, he pays a fare, and he gets on board, and he goes with the sailors to Tarshish away from the presence of the Lord, which tells us not that God's presence is limited or that God doesn't live in Spain, but that he is trying to flee. He is trying to get away from God. Yes, Bruce?
I know this story.
You do?
Yes, you do.
All right, let's see. All right, so the next part, verse 4. You help me read it, all right? But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty, what's the word there? Tempest. Oh my goodness, a tempest
We've read
on the
that.
sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Do you know what a tempest is, guys? A tempest is a big storm. It's not just like a normal storm. It's a terrifying storm. It's also a play by Shakespeare, yes. But it is a big, big storm on the sea, and it's threatening to destroy this ship. And why is this happening? Is this just happening because there's storms? What does it say there in verse 4? Who caused the storm?
One second, I read through a farther side.
He actually was reading ahead.
Yeah, Audrey? The Lord caused it, right? Sometimes we don't like to think of that, but sometimes God sends a storm. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes everything falls apart in front of us, and we might think, oh, this terrible thing that happened by chance, maybe it was God trying to get your attention, right? Here Jonah is rebelling. Here he's running away from God's calling, and the most loving thing God can do is actually stop him, is to send him the right way. So, the storm comes. It threatens to break up the ship. It's dramatic. And then verse 5, then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. All right, who's praying on this ship? Everyone except the guy that God called to be his messenger, the person that he called to speak his word, to turn to him in prayer. Yeah, Brew.
Maybe those other guys should do that job.
Yeah, you wonder why. In the Bible, God reveals himself to the Gentiles and calls them. That's his thread all through the Old Testament. It's always, guys, if you're not going to do this, I can find other people to bring in. And God does find other people. He brings in the Gentiles, right? So these sailors, they're actually doing the right thing, right? They're doing the calling God gave them. They're sailing. And now they're caught in the middle of this storm. They're suffering. And why are the pagan sailors suffering? Yeah, Audrey? Because Jonah didn't do that. Isn't that a scary thought, that sometimes people around us suffer because we're not doing what God called us to do, right? If I don't do what God called me to do, and, take care of you guys, put a roof over your head, get groceries. What's going to happen to you guys? You're going to be real hungry, right? So Jonah, people suffer when you don't carry out your calling. So sometimes people like to be glib about the gospel and say things like, well, I'm forgiven so I can do whatever I want. Well, who's going to hurt if you just do whatever you want? The people around you, right? God called you to love your neighbor because they need your help and support. God doesn't need your good works, as Luther says, but your neighbor does. And so Jonah is asleep in the ship. And this is another warning for us Christians. Sometimes Christians can be the worst person in the group, right? You know, we don't have a protection about being better than everyone else. Jonah is the one who's a believer, or should be, and he is in full-on rebellion. He is asleep while everyone else is panicking. And everyone else is praying to their gods. They're doing the best they can, right? These sailors, they only probably know about, the Babylonian deities of the sea, the precursors to Neptune and Poseidon, and they're turning to them in prayer, trying to get help. They're even throwing off their cargo. They're giving up all of their stuff to try to be delivered. And who is the faithless, prayerless one? It is Jonah. It is God's prophet. It's not something I take any pleasure in saying, but it's an important reminder. I had a pastor who once said, there's nothing that I couldn't do 5 minutes from getting down and leading the service. Just remember that, the church has been in trouble throughout history because it's put people on pedestals and believed that they were so much purer and better than everyone else. And when that happens, then people's hearts are broken when they see sin happen. But here's a lesson. God's called prophet, total rebellion. Verse 6. Not verse 6. Sorry, where were we, Brucey? Oh, yeah, we were verse 6, yeah. So the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish." This is supposed to have a comedic effect. This is supposed to be showing us this upside down world. Who's the one telling the pastor to go and do his church work? The pagan, the unbeliever, the person who shouldn't know anything about this. And it's a shame to God's people. It's God is saying, I see all this. I see that there are pagans out there that are, trying and have some notion of the truth, but they don't know. And Jonah has this audience, these people who are desperate to hear about his God, and he doesn't want to do it, right? He's sleeping. And I like that translation. I don't know if your translation has something different in verse 6, but when he says, "What do you mean, you sleeper?"
Mine says, how can you sleep?
Yeah.
Get up and call on your God.
Yeah. There's this sense of what are you meaning to do? And our actions carry out this sense of how could you do this in a storm? It's not only a rejection of his God, but just the human sense of just call out to a God, cry out for help, right? We're desperate. So this captain is in this sense a believer. I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent again. I'm so sorry. There are different theories people have to argue for the existence of God. If you've ever heard of apologetics or done apologetics before, these are the reasons and the arguments that people have for God. And I'm going to remind our young little confirmands, what's the car theory of why God exists? Do you remember the picture, guys? Ruth?
There had to be a reason.
Yes, there had to be a first causer, right? And this is the modern version of an ancient argument that Thomas Aquinas uses. So if you've ever been in a traffic jam before and you've had a bunch of cars and the first car gets to go, it takes about 1 second for the next car to go, right? Now imagine there is an infinity amount of cars in front of you in the traffic jam, and then your little car is over here. The first car starts going. Takes a second for the next car to go. But there's an infinite amount of cars. How long does it take before you get to drive?
Depends on how many cars there are.
Forever.
Yeah.
you never get to drive, right? So this is their argument. Can the world have always existed then? If the world always existed, would we ever get to the present moment that we're in? No, it would take forever. So it's kind of a funny philosophical argument, but it basically says there has to be a prime mover. There has to be a first cause. That's the first argument for the existence of God, the prime mover. The second argument for the existence of God is probably a little easier. The modern example of it is C.S. Lewis uses it as the orange analogy. Imagine there's 3 kids on a playground and they're all going to share an orange, and it splits into a certain amount of sections. And one guy takes all of the orange and gives one section to one kid and one section to another kid. What are the kids going to say? Brew? That's not fair, right? Well, what is fairness? Well, fairness is an idea that we have inside of our hearts that things should be equal, that it's wrong, that you've wronged someone if you said you were going to do something and didn't do it. And so the argument is that we have a moral law inside of us. We have a sense of right and wrong, and that doesn't come from nature, right? Because the creature that takes all of the orange and doesn't share does better than the one that does share, right? So that's the 2 traditional arguments for God. But Luther, commenting on this very chapter and point in Jonah, emphasizes that actually it's more than that. That in our lives, moments happen where God kind of reveals himself to us. He shows us his existence and power. So it's not even that we just have to figure out philosophical arguments for the existence of God, but that God actually dramatically encounters us. And the place where you will see people dramatically encountering the idea of God is usually when they're doing surgery and the anesthetic starts to wear off, right? What do people start crying? God help me, right? Oh God, I've been in those hospital rooms before. And they cry out because there is this innate sense we have in us that we are created, that we have a God. There's the old phrase, there's no atheists in foxholes, right? People do cry out to God. And so here we get a powerful example of how God reveals himself in our lives. These guys haven't read the Bible. They don't necessarily know a whole lot about religion, but they know there is a God of some kind, and they want to speak to him and to know him. And Jonah knows him, and Jonah's not telling them. Any other questions, complaints? I know the car one lost you. That's okay. Don't worry about the car one. That's just you can. Yes, Bruce.
I have a question.
Yes, ask.
I may have just read through the whole chapter.
That's not a question. That's a statement.
Oh.
All right. Okay, so moving on, verse 7. And they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Now, if they're casting lots, what does this mean about Jonah? So Jonah gets dragged up from the bottom of the ship. Does he take this chance to explain what's happening? No, this is the missionary being invited to preach, being invited to tell everyone, and him saying, "No, I'm good. I don't know what's happening." Jonah's deception is incredible. So they cast lots because they even have a sense of, well, there's probably a God, there's probably a right and a wrong, and one of us probably did something wrong. So whose fault is it? And it's Jonah's. And then you look at the mercy of the sailors. Verse 8. Then they said to him, "Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? And where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?" Oh, I've been here before. You're having a great conversation with a stranger. They're being very friendly and nice to you. And then they ask, "And what do you do for a living?" And then you say, "I'm a pastor." And they go, "Oh, well, I'm gonna, the relationship's over, right? You don't make friends when you say that at the end of the sentence, right? So Jonah is ashamed, right? He doesn't want to tell them what he is and who he is, because, even they will know right away, "What are you doing, man?" So the fact that the sailors don't immediately throw him overboard tells me that they have something to them. They have some sense of compassion, some sense of morality. All right, so they ask him this, and finally it's dragged out of him. Verse 9, and he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. Remember, in Hebrew, the Lord is Yahweh. So it's not just, I worship a God. We think of the Lord as just a kind of a generic term. The Lord means the personal name of Yahweh. So they're saying, well, who do you worship? And he says, well, I worship Yahweh. He's actually the God of heaven, and he also made the sea and the land. So this would have been a bigger God than these people would have been used to. They would have been used to, there's a God of this sea, or there's a God of this particular thing. And Jonah is telling them, oh, I actually worship the real God, and he's in charge of everything. And I can imagine these sailors going, you idiot, have you not put this together already? So he tells them half of it. He doesn't even give them the full answer. He doesn't really even tell them any more than that. Verse 10, then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. I remember being taught this in evangelism. Sometimes it's embarrassing or difficult for us as humans to tell people about Jesus. But what will be the response from friends who don't know about Jesus when Jesus returns and they find out, oh, you were a Christian? You knew all of this all along and you didn't say any of this to me? You never mentioned it? This is what their reaction is, right? Why didn't you tell us? Why are you doing the exact opposite thing? Why are you fleeing? What is this you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. So now he finally spills the beans. He tells them, yeah, I'm actually doing the exact opposite of what God has called me to. And I risked all of your presence by being on board here. This is more serious than going to a family reunion with the flu. This is like putting all these people's lives at risk. So Jonah, you can see that he also, even in this action, he doesn't seem to care that much about the lives of pagans, right? He's pretty, I guess nowadays you might say racist, right? He has the sense that he's the good guy. Their lives don't matter. I don't want to preach to them. I don't want to go to them. I don't want to speak to them. And that's sort of Jonah's perspective here. Verse 11, then they said to him, what shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us? For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. What does tempestuous mean, Bruce? It's like the tempest, right? What's the tempest? The tempest is the storm, right? So it's getting worse. So they know this. It's getting worse. It's getting more tempestuous.
They're like, what can we do to help? And he was like,
he doesn't even acknowledge it. Yeah. It's like, this is not my problem, right?
And like he knows exactly it's his fault and like knew from the get-go and did nothing.
Like
it shows like they seem to actually care more than
they care more about doing the right thing than Jonah does, right? Which again leaves us to a very difficult problem. Can someone who's a believer not care about doing good more than even pagans? Yes, it can. There are some people that invest their whole lives in this other type of service and their callings. They're workaholics. But yeah, he doesn't care, and it keeps getting worse. Another human response. There's a problem. What are we going to do? We're going to ignore it, and it'll go away, right? They ignore it. What happens? It gets worse.
Now, I will say in my translation, it's what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?
Yeah. So it's they're trying to figure it out at this point. Verse
less helpful.
Less helpful at this point, and you can get it, right? They're fighting for their lives here. And he said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." So Jonah has a lot of answers he could give them. One of them might have been, "Can we go back to Joppa and I can go do my job?" What's Jonah say?
I would rather die.
don't have to do my job.
Exactly, right? He is saying, I choose death over service to God. That's how far Jonah has gone. And we need to not hide that fact, right? We need to remember that Jonah is that far gone. He's saying, I don't want to preach so badly that, you know what, I'll drown. Send me into the ocean. Remember, Israel, the people of Israel, seafaring nation? No. Jonah might not even know how to swim, and he's saying, throw me into the ocean. Bro, indeed. Yeah. So he says, throw me into the ocean, for I know the cause. It is because of me that the great tempest has come upon you. Look at what the sailors do, verse 13. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. So these sailors, even after he says, throw me into the sea, what are they doing? Yeah, they're trying to get him to, they're loving their neighbor as themselves, right? Jonah is saying, I don't want to follow God's law and his commands. The sailors are trying their best to follow God's law and God's commands. And so, Bru?
If in that storm, won't all of them go down?
Yeah, all of them will die, right? Yeah, they'll all be condemned. Although Jonah's now told them about the true God, and it seems like they believe in him because they're acting accordingly. They're living their lives now as if God's word is true, and Jonah is not living his life as if God's word is true, right? So there's an interesting dichotomy. All right, verse 14. Therefore, they called out to... Who do they call out to, kids? The Lord. They called out to Yahweh. Did they know this God before? Nope. So what do? They now believe in the Lord, and they are calling out to him in prayer. What does the Old Testament say? All who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. Yeah. So what has Jonah done by accident? He's become a missionary. He has his first converts, right? He has caused people to believe in God when that was the exact opposite of what he wanted to do, right? So it's a good lesson for us. Is God going to accomplish his purposes in life, even if we don't want them to be accomplished? Yes. God doesn't get thwarted by us. So God just converts these sailors. God says, let's get even more people converted, right? These pagans would have just sailed to Tarshish without Jonah, and now these people are going to be celebrating in heaven because they now know the Lord. They know the true God. So even when we sin, even when we go in the wrong direction, God can use it for good.
So they're still going to go to Tarshish?
I don't know. Now they're trying to sail back to the land, right? They're desperate. So they're...
No, I'm just wondering if if they were, would they get out and be like, hey...
Want to hear a wild story, and then, would they become missionaries? I don't know. There are some people who have stories like that, right? So it does happen sometimes. I don't know. But now they're trying to get back to the land because they don't want to kill this guy, even though this guy has done everything wrong. They are loving him. They don't want to do this. So they call out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So these guys already know this is God's will. They're asking for forgiveness. They're praying that God's will is done. And they are trusting that he is the Lord of earth and sea, and he will do what is right. And so verse 15, so they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. All right, so a sacrifice in Old Testament language is an offering of faith. It is what we would call a good work in New Testament theology. So it tells us not only have these men been converted, they have become believers, but now they are also doing good works. They are offering worship and praise. What did they sacrifice? I don't know. It says they already threw everything else that they needed into the sea. Maybe when they had something precious to them that they offered. Sacrifices in the Old Testament, remember, can take many forms. Sacrifices are not just blood sacrifices on the altar. Sometimes the sacrifice is someone pouring something out, a drink offering, just giving up something. Sometimes it's burning something. So maybe they threw something into the sea that was really valuable to them in sacrifice, just to say, God, we're not taking it lightly that you've spared our lives. We believe in you. We worship you. We thank you for freeing us from this certain death. So Jonah, despite his best efforts, has become a missionary. He has made his first converts. These people now believe in Yahweh. They believe in the God of Israel. They turn to him in prayer. And does God deliver them? Yes, the sea stops its raging. So it shows us that God not only cares about Jonah, but God cares more about these pagans. He cares more about these people who didn't, necessarily know anything about him a few days before. So does God love unbelievers? Does he care about people that have nothing to do with him? Yes, he does. This is the entire point of the book of Jonah. And we see it again and again and again in each of the chapters here. Verse 17, and the Lord appointed a great... What does it say, Bruce? Verse 17, a great fish. Does your translation say something different than fish? It might say whale.
No, I was reading it again.
Okay. It says fish. In the King James, what does it say here?
Mine also says fish.
Yeah, fish is the right translation. Sometimes people say whale, but it's fish in the King James too.
Same with the S.
Okay, good. So he's in the belly of the fish, appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. This has led a lot of fishermen to pray because God can make the fish bite. And we see this in Jonah. That was a joke that did not land. But Jonah is swallowed up by a fish, and he's in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. I have no idea what this looks like. There are giant fish in the ocean. There are all sorts of creatures in the ocean that we don't even know. I mean, we haven't even explored.
Isn't it?
Yeah?
I had a thought one time reading this, that there is nothing God could do.
Yeah.
So he could make a fish.
Yeah.
Or some...
Yeah, some creature, yeah.
Leviathan.
Yeah, Leviathan, yeah.
That swallows him is big enough to swallow a human being.
And they might just exist in the ocean to this day, and we just don't know about them because we haven't even gotten there. Yeah. Or it was ancient. Yeah.
Or it was a one-off.
It was a one-off. It could have been that too. Do you have a question, Bruce? You just like your hand up? That's cool. Either way. Okay.
Either way, this is why I don't like the
Yeah, this is why some people don't like the ocean, right? This is why when I saw Jaws, stayed away from the ocean for quite a while. Yes. That's okay. So Jonah is swallowed. He's in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. There's a lot of cool news stories you can look up about people who are in similar situations. There was a few years back a gentleman whose boat capsized, and inside the little sort of captain's area, there was enough air for him to stay alive underwater, and then he managed to get rescued after, more than a day. So there's all sorts of wild accounts like that, but the point is that God cannot be thwarted, that you can't escape from God, that even if you throw yourself in the ocean because you don't want to be a missionary, God's going to find a way to make it work, to convince you, right? And so Jonah goes into the belly of the fish. And I want us to read this prayer because it's an incredible prayer of worship. It has a ton of theology in it. And we can learn a lot from Jonah, and it tells us something about Jonah's faith. So far, I've only had bad things to say about Jonah, but let's look at the good about Jonah. Verse 1. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Sheol is the Hebrew word for death, for the realm of the dead, for like Hades. So he's saying, I'm calling out from death, from, Hades. I'm crying out to God. And you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. A lot there to emphasize. So first of all, he cries out, there's a lot in Sheol. It's this realm of the dead. They didn't quite understand the resurrection of the dead. They didn't quite understand heaven to a great degree in the Old Testament. So they spoke of this realm of the dead, of going to their ancestors. And Jonah in verse 3 finally views God's hand in this, because he says, you cast me into the sea, right? So is Jonah blaming the sailors for doing it? No. He is saying, God, you have put me on this path, and you've done this injustice. And so it's one of those things where he realizes that what has gone wrong in his life is his fault, and it is God's just punishment for it, right? There are sad moments in my life where I found myself in a spot where I have had to pray like Jonah and say, God, I got myself into this mess, and I see your judgment in it. So he's surrounded by the heart of the seas. This terrifying flood surrounds him. And this brings to mind all the different other floods. Some of the passages you mentioned actually earlier, guys. You mentioned, remember when they're going through the Red Sea and the Egyptians follow them? What happens to the Egyptians? Whoosh, all the water goes in and floods them, right? When Noah and his family get into the ark and the rains come, what happens to everyone else? Whoosh, the flood takes them away. So the flood is this terrifying image for them of God's judgment. And who has God's judgment come upon, according to Jonah? Himself, right? This is Jonah's version of us saying, I, a poor, miserable sinner, confess unto you all my sins and iniquities. Right? So he is confessing. So judgment is not fun, but it leads us to repentance. It leads us to confession. Verse 4, then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. All right, what a dramatic account we've heard. So we've heard Jonah, he goes and he converts the sailors, getting dragged, kicked, and screaming to his calling. Then he gets thrown into the ocean. The sailors are delivered. Jonah is swallowed by this fish. He is surrounded by the flood. There is seaweed wrapped around his head. If you've ever had seaweed even on your foot in the lake, you kind of go, ugh, it's creepy, right? He sees in this a cosmic divine judgment, that he is in the lowest of the low. He says it feels so low. It's like I've been dragged down to the roots of the mountains, down to the bottom of the sea. He says it's like bars were closed above me. I've seen paintings done before of the rib cage of the whale, like the bars that are above Jonah, right? So I don't know, but it's a fascinating image. And even there, even in this, I'm going to use the word because he uses the word Sheol. Sometimes it's incorrectly kind of translated as hell, but it's this hellish environment for Jonah, right? He is being brought down as low as he can. And Jesus calls his death and resurrection the sign of Jonah, right? The same sort of process, right? And so Jonah is going through this death experience. He's being brought low, and even there, even inside a fish, God hears his prayer. So it's a powerful lesson for us about the omnipresence of God. So Jonah initially started because he was trying to flee from God, and now in the depths of the ocean, what does he learn? God is everywhere. There is no fleeing from him, right? Even here, he hears my prayer. And that's a very powerful lesson for us wherever we find ourselves in life. We are able to cry out to God. And so Jonah says, I will see your temple again. I will sacrifice. I will believe. This is him saying, I'll go back to church. I'll put something in the offering plate, right? I am going to do my calling. I am going to do what you have sent me to do. And so Jonah repents. Questions, comments, concerns on this dramatic account from Jonah? There's a natural divide there, so I'm going to stop there and stop the camera for